Good morning, church. Welcome to this edition of Checking In with Pastor Jim. It is June 22nd, 2020, and that may be a special day on your calendar, but I don't know what makes it special in other ways. Maybe it's your birthday or the birthday of somebody you know, but it is not Father's Day. It's not the first day of summer. It's not Juneteenth, right? So the last few days I've been talking about those things. And yesterday, of course, was actually Father's Day. I had the joy of seeing both of my daughters, not in person, but take a look. We got to do a little FaceTime chat yesterday. And you can see those two beautiful girls, Ellie on the left and Catherine on the right. And down there somewhere, my little picture. Happy to talk to my two girls on Father's Day. Aren't they gorgeous? Well, yes, I'm a little biased, but I think they are. They take after their mother. Lucky them. That's what I always say. Lucky them. Today is June 22nd, and it might just be a good time to continue a national conversation going on right now about racism. And I can almost hear some of you saying, oh, not again. I do want to say this. I believe First Baptist Church has been ahead in this conversation rather than behind. I remember 3 years ago, May of 2017, going to Louisville, Kentucky for a conference called the Angela Project. And I didn't know what it was going to be about completely. I knew that we were going to be talking about racism and how it affects people in this country. But I did not know that 1619 was when the first enslaved African set foot on the soil of this country. And they think that her name was Angela. So this was the Angela Project, and the idea was that for 3 years, 2017, 2018, 2019, we would get together and talk about issues of race in this country and how we are still affected by racism. I attended that conference. It was a full-day conference, and by the end of it, my eyes were so wide open I could not fall asleep that night. Some people would say that I was fully woke. Maybe not fully, but on the way after that conference. And I came back from Louisville so excited by what I had learned that I wanted to share it with my congregation. So guess what? The next Sunday, the topic of racism came up in the sermon. And the Sunday after that, the topic of racism came up in the sermon. And I began to get pushback from members of the congregation who were uncomfortable with that topic. And so on the third Sunday, I promised I wasn't going to talk about racism, and then I couldn't not talk about it. I ended up saying something else, and that's when the members of my kitchen cabinet said to me, Jim, I think you've pushed too hard, too fast, too far. You need to back down from that topic. One woman in our church told me after that third sermon, she said, Dr. Somerville, you have to understand, I am not a racist. And I thought, oh my goodness, is that what you thought, that I was accusing you of being a racist? Not at all, not at all. I know you are one of the good ones. You are one of the ones who's going to help us put an end to racism in this country. I thought it might be helpful today just to define some terms, right? Racism, first of all, looking up this dictionary definition, a belief that race is the primary determinant of human traits and capacities, and that racial differences produce an inherent superiority of a particular race. We've talked about this before, going back to Linnaeus, that Swedish biologist and naturalist who divided everything into genus and species, and then thought he needed to subdivide the human species into red and yellow, black and white. I won't say that he was the father of racism, but he made it part of the culture in a way that it hadn't been before. So racism is a belief A racist, on the other hand, is a person who shows or feels discrimination or prejudice against people of other races, or who believes that a particular race is superior to another. So when this woman said to me, "I am not a racist," I thought, no, you are not. But racism is still a problem in our society. The reason that I talked about it from the pulpit is that I really believe the people of First Baptist Church can be champions in the fight against something that is called systemic racism. That's a whole different thing. This is not individual or personal racism. It's not about what you feel. I'm not calling you a racist. I'm saying that this racism has gotten into the system in our country, and it affects the system at every level. And the systems of racism in our society need to be dismantled, right? One of my colleagues had this analogy that I thought was helpful. She said, if you're walking out through a field and you come to a pond and you see one dead fish in the pond, you think, oh, something's wrong with that fish. But if you keep walking and you come to another pond and all the fish are dead, you say, oh, something's wrong with that pond. But if you keep walking and in every pond all the fish are dead, you say, something must be wrong with the groundwater. And so that's a helpful understanding of systemic racism, that it's in the groundwater of America. And that's where we need to deal with it, is down on that level. It's not so much about how I treat people who are different from me, or how you treat people who are different from you, even though I would hope that you would treat them well and treat them kindly. It's more about this other thing, this systemic racism, sometimes known as institutional racism or structural racism. And so we can think about, how do we fight against that? One example is the effort a few years ago to increase transportation options for people living in the city of Richmond. The bus lines just run within the city. Can't get out into Chesterfield or Hanover or Henrico County on the bus in the same way you can get around in the city of Richmond. And somebody just said, if poor people who live in the city of Richmond could get out to Short Pump, for example, they might be able to get jobs in some of those stores out there. Well, that was a way to approach systemic racism. How can we increase transportation options so that people of color can get to the places where they might get a job? Simple enough, right? It took some doing, took some work, but it's happening. It's beginning to change. I thought about this sometime in the wee hours of the morning. I thought, if I had stood in front of the congregation and talked about atheism, right? You know what that is? Atheism. If I had stood up and said, atheism is a problem in this country, we've got to do something about atheism, I can't imagine that anyone would have said to me later, Dr. Somerville, I am not an atheist, right? Because an atheist is a person who doesn't believe in God. Atheism is this idea that God does not exist. If I had preached against atheism, I think I could have gotten some loud amens, because none of you would consider yourselves an atheist. I'd love to think the same thing would be true, that if I feel led to preach on racism again, I would get some loud amens from the congregation, because I'm talking about systemic racism, institutional racism, structural racism, the kind that is embedded deep within our society and needs to be pulled up by the roots. I hope you would understand yourself as a champion for that kind of justice, that you would start rolling up your sleeves and saying, Dr. Somerville, tell me, what can I do to root out systemic racism in our nation, right? That's what I believe about you, is that you are a champion for justice, not a racist. Good gracious, no. So if somebody said to you, are you an atheist? You would say no. And if they said, how can I know that? What's your proof? You would say, I believe in God. I say my prayers. I read the Bible. I go to church. I love my neighbor. That's how you know I'm not an atheist. So if someone did say to you, are you a racist? You could say, oh, no, goodness, no, not me. And if they said, how can I know? What's your proof? Well, what would you say? Maybe you could say, I am getting all the education I can on this issue so that I'm not ignorant about racism, especially about systemic or structural racism. You could say, I'm reading books that help me understand better. I'm watching movies. Netflix right now has a whole series of movies that are free to subscribers on the whole Black Lives Matter issue. You can watch those. You can learn from those. One of the books that I'm trying to wade through still is this one by W.E.B. Du Bois called The Souls of Black Folk, written back in the early part of the 20th century. Can I tell you this? It is dense. It is hard to read. This man uses some really big words and puts them together in very beautiful ways, but the type is dense. So, it's taken me a long time to read through a little book just because there is so much there. But I'm trying to learn, trying to listen, trying to love my neighbors of color in the right ways by helping to dismantle the structures of racism. So today, I just want to say, it's not Juneteenth, it's not the first day of summer, not Father's Day, but it may be a good day to broaden your love for your neighbor, to reach out a little wider, to cast that net wide enough to learn what's out there in the system and how you might roll up your sleeves and be a champion for justice. Maybe there's something you could do today that would make things better in this world. That sounds to me like bringing heaven a little closer to earth, and that's what we are all about. So friends, thank you for listening. And I hope today is as beautiful for you as it looks outside. It looks beautiful, and I hope it is for you. I will see you tomorrow, and the day after that, and then maybe somebody else will have the check-in on Thursday of this week. We'll see. For now, God bless you. May you know in your heart you are not an atheist or a racist, but someone who really does love God and neighbor. Bye for now.